All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. Today we'll be talking about supply chain attacks and policy. And raise your hand if you're from SIGPolicy. Woo! Yeah. So a couple announcements. Next meeting is our last meeting with SOGNIC. Very sad, but the semester's wrapping up. Make sure you guys come out to that. This is, I've been told, MPC computation is the fun part of EC 407. So if you don't want to take 407, just come to his meeting and then you've learned all you want to know. Also, DEF CON quals are May 4th. So we'll probably be playing in that alongside Purdue and OSU. So, or Michigan, probably OSU too. Okay, here's the meeting flag. So SIGPolicy people, you can go to that URL and put it in, get your 50 points, make a dent in the scoreboard. Only 45,000 points away. Yeah. Okay, so firstly, I'm going to cover the XZ attack, and then SIGPolicy is going to present about supply chain policy, and then we're going to have an interactive sort of discussion about stuff, hopefully. Okay, so this is a recent supply chain attack in a library called XZutils. So XZutils is a library for lossless compression. It's widely used and installed on pretty much every Linux and Mac OS operating system. And this attack, once discovered, was known to be very technically complex. It involves a multi-stage payload. And due to how complex it is, many people think it was a nation-state attack. And this was caught early by a Microsoft engineer who noticed a 0.5 second startup delay in SSH and just happened to profile it pretty much a day or two after the attack went live. So if this wasn't caught early, this could have spread to pretty much every major operating system. It would have been a massive, massive vulnerability. So these are the compromised versions. So enough analysis has been done that we know that XZ version will not trigger anything bad. So you can run that, make sure you're not currently infected. If you are, update, please. These are the main things that were affected, which are Debian and Fedora. There's also a larger list of potentially affected systems, though they're still investigating if any of these were known. But if you notice, Nix OS is on there, Homebrew is on there. So yeah, definitely make sure you run this command, XZ version. Make sure you didn't get hacked. Okay, here's a little overview of the attack. Found this nice graphic. So I'm going to pretend that I'm just going to summarize the graphic. Yeah, so this guy Giat75 commits to the repo. He gains the trust of the maintainer. So he opens some legitimate PRs, some not so legitimate PRs. One of the PRs he opens removes fuzzing support for XZutils. He also, once gaining trust from the main engineer of XZ, he starts doing some bad stuff. So he adds a modification to a script called build-to-host.m4, which is only different on the download page. So on GitHub, you wouldn't notice the modified thing. And then he also obfuscates the backdoor in 2 test files. So in this script, he adds a sort of hard-to-spot line where he runs a sed command and pipes it to eval. Turns out this sed command will take test files that match and sort of takes these corrupted test files and decompresses them and runs them as a bash script. And this bash script hooks into the build process and actually activates the backdoor. Yeah, and then so there's 2 versions. There's 5.6, which was the original one he released, where he just committed the 2 test files. And then he released 5.6.1 with like the message, updated the test files for a more standard random seed. He only updated these 2 test files. And this update allowed him to, in the future, add potentially more test files that could modify the functionality of his backdoor. Yeah, so sort of the main keynotes here are build-to-host.m4 in the released tarballs are different than the upstream on GitHub. Usually this is fine. It's common in C projects, except this time the file's malicious, so it's not fine. So this script, in certain conditions, unpacks the malicious test files. So on the left, I have like an image of what the corrupt test file might look like, and then it actually extracts the valid parts of data from the corrupt file and extracts it. And then it uses the sort of ifunc part of glibc to do runtime hooking into OpenSSH authentication protocol. Yeah, and this allowed him to do RCE on your whatever machine he wants. So pretty scary stuff. Any questions? Yeah.
Does this only work if the SSH is enabled through systemctl, or is this always on?
The SSH daemon has to be linked with the LZMA support.
Okay.
So there's additional conditions for it. Yeah. Any other questions?
Does liblzma have to be under user lib?
Yeah. It matches a specific path. I don't remember the details. I think it matches like user lib. It matches a very specific path, and if that path doesn't exist, it just aborts. Yeah, there was a nice living article I read on GitHub. So if you look up XZ attack gist, comes up. It's pretty comprehensive about everything in the attack. Okay, so now we're going to hand it over to SIGPolicy to talk about supply chain attacks. So this is, I would say, pretty bad example of a supply chain attack, right? Almost everything in the world relies on XZ. XZ is hacked. Everything in the world is hacked. So why is this bad, and how can we prevent?
Well, I actually don't have a good answer, so this is why I'm going to turn this over to everybody in this room. Normally we have like circular tables, but we don't really do this. So I'm going to try to partition everybody based on where you're sitting into 4 different groups. The 4 groups, as we will see why they're important later, are going to be open source developers. We're going to have a group that is the government, and we're going to have a group that just represents corporations, because these are our major stakeholders within actually creating policy for maintaining like open source software. So does anybody like have a very strong pro or anti-government stance? And we could partition based on that.
What's the 4th group?
4th group? So there's going to be 2 open source developer groups.
Oh.
Yes. No? Okay. So then I'm just going to come around and we're going to say, you guys, or wait, how many people? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 groups of like 3 to 4-ish. Does that seem okay? All right, so you guys could be like open source. Okay, you guys could be like, you guys are open source like software aid. You guys have really niche products, and you're vital to our nation's like security. Does that kind of make sense? Oh, so all you have to know is that this is the group you're representing. What we're going to do is we're going to throw up a bunch of policies and different ways to secure the software supply chain. We're going to give you essentially a grab bag. From this grab bag of policies that we give, you guys need to figure out what is best for your ends. For example, as open source developers, you guys like creativity. You want to deliver a good product, but you don't, well, 1, you don't really have resources, so you kind of want resources. And 2, you want to make sure that you have complete control over it. Give me a thumbs up if that kind of makes sense. Yeah? Okay, cool. Let's see. You 3 are the governments. Okay, so as the government, you're like, we want security. You want to do 4? All right, the 4 of you guys are all the government.
Sure.
Okay, government's a lot more excited than open source developers, as it should be. You guys have more resources. You want security, but the thing is like, whatever you want, if you want to kind of control it. So just keep that in mind. You guys know what the government is. All right.
You know what government is.
Let's see. Why don't you guys be corporations? You are like Google. You're the Microsoft. You got all the bucks here.
Okay.
And so what you guys want is like, you kind of want free stuff. Yeah. And then the last 3, you guys are another 4 open source developer team. You're in the trenches here. And yeah, they want like your stuff. And you're nice enough to give it to them.
Come on.
But at the same time,
You don't wanna be.
yeah, dude, you're really playing the role. Yeah, so that's kind of where we're at. Is everyone like kind of clear about the rules? All right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna throw a lot of policies and then just try to figure out what you think would be better for your team. Because what's gonna happen at the very end is that you have to get everybody else to agree with which policies we're gonna get passed today. And so that is the name of the game. So first off, we're gonna kind of turn into governmental policies. Oh, yeah. So that's kind of what I just said. Is this what? A debate club for CS people. I like that. I really like that. But we actually do talk about some pretty in-depth policy things. So what we're gonna look at. You're a corporation. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so we're gonna talk about Executive Order 14028, passed 2 years ago under Biden. This was something that was passed to secure the nation's cybersecurity. And under this was a section where Biden wants to secure the software supply chain. So as president of the United States, Biden has power, but he doesn't have that much power. What he can do is tell specifically executive agencies what to do. So he shuffles around a lot of different executive agencies. For example, NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology. He tells them to develop a software supply chain security. So he basically says, go and interview academics, go talk with corporations, open source software developers. You guys are kind of tiny, but like he could talk to you. You guys can try to talk to the government, but it's kind of hard for you. So sorry about that. But essentially, NIST is charged with just like developing best practices and just talking to people, trying to figure out what the guidelines should be. Another thing he asked was for the NTIA to create the minimum elements of a software bill of materials. So software bill of materials, we're going to get to this on the next slide. Essential idea is to say, here's my dependencies. Like if something breaks, we could like at least track what that is. The DNI to define critical software, because as the government, you guys are very scared of.
Security attacks. And
Yeah,
terrorist attacks.
yeah, you're really scared of like something breaking. Well done.
Good go.
Finally, he instructs the Bar Council essentially to say like software products that do not meet the requirements, we can remove them from government contracts. The government doesn't have that much say into corporations. You guys are kind of insulated from that. You have your all like freedom of speech rights and like privacy rights. But Biden can basically say, we ain't gonna give you money if you're not gonna do what we want. And then finally, this is talking about creating an IoT consumer labeling program, which Ryan Cunningham was very, very like happy about. Something about IoT devices are not super secure at the best of times. So we're not going to talk about NIST like specific securing the software supply chain document because that document was very poorly written. Instead, the NSA published essentially a securing the software supply chain, a developer's guide. Which is actually like not terrible. As you can see by this little human working on the cloud, this is exactly how coding works. And so, but the essential idea here is that every single time you like test things or build them or deploy them, it should all be in a very secure location. And then he talks about how, you know, this is exactly what a network is. And whenever you put stuff into the internet, which is represented by a cloud, which is, and then external repositories are the entire earth. Again, NSA, that everything should just be like developed securely. I'm not gonna bore you with the guideline details. One, because I was really bored by them, and two, I think you guys probably have the gist of it, yes.
I was gonna say, I think that graph is missing a node where you insert the back door and give us government the keys.
What is the government scared of?
People asserting their rights.
All right, so then we're going to talk about a software bill of materials. This is what's, I didn't really understand this, but this is what's an example of software bill of materials is. So for every step in the software development lifecycle, you want to know like the supplier, product name, version, license identification, and like digital ID for those. And the idea is that according to the government, if they are able to know the software bill of materials, at least for everything that they get as a software product, it is much easier to trace.
what happens when things go wrong. So it's basically this notion of like how to secure the supply chain that you would for a physical product apply to like software. And then we have a new definition of critical software. This notion is used such that anything that is defined as critical software, you as a government can assert more
Control.
control over it. So for example, if these poor open source software people, if whatever you're doing is defined as critical software, well, y'all better like step it up a little bit, because otherwise we can get attacked and the government doesn't like that. Or rights, but no, I'm kidding. You'll just pull it down from, oh. Okay, that is one option that you can use. And then later on, this is cybersecurity requirements for consumer grade router products. So essentially IoT devices, they are trying to create some labeling program, but again, it's kind of difficult for the government to force industry to adopt this.
Put these in place, sorry, I was asking.
Right, this is NIST, so the National Institute of Standards and Technology.
All right, my follow-up question, did you know the NSA prefers to tap routers among all the devices? Yes, that was part of the Snowden leaks. And this would, I think, be the same NIST that also supported the, was it smooth prime, sweet prime, you know, the.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, anyway, that's why I was like a little bit suspect of NIST, sorry.
you should be, not on this.
Shame on you.
From the NSA. Standing their own ground. Okay.
I mean, government, you might have to answer that later, because we have open source developers and corporations kind of being like, y'all, you aren't really nice.
If you haven't committed a crime, what do you have to hide?
Spoken like a Fed.
This is my dog, aren't you?
All right, so then what happened? Was this after, oh, this was after Log4j. So after Log4j happens, do you want to give us like a brief 10-second summary of Log4j?
Log4j was a vulnerability in a logging agent in Java, and it was really bad. It will allow remote code execution on a lot of Java stuff.
And it was discovered by like kids playing Minecraft.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So really, wait, this is kind of off topic. Really fun fact. The CFAA was kind of passed after Ronald Reagan saw a movie called War Games. Were you guys aware of this? And War Games was a kid hacking into a government computer and like launching the nuclear games. So in this case, Log4j, a bunch of kids playing Minecraft actually did discover a huge vulnerability. This bill was introduced, never passed. This was securing the Open Source Software Act of 2022. And in this case, Congress was basically saying like, yo, this is a problem. Maybe we should solve this. So you can read on the side essentially what happens. They instructed CISA, cybersecurity agency, to, again, not really do much, but like publish a framework, do some more research, try to figure out, assess the risk of open source software, use it to assess like security stuff. OMB, which is interesting, that's the Office of Management and Budget. So it kind of has the money. It instructed the OMB to issue guidance to executive agencies to manage and reduce the risk of open source software. So what is really nice about this, I was like the open source software people, you guys are like, oh, okay, this is nice. Because one of your major worries is that if the government starts regulating open source software, then that puts more burden on you to comply with both government requests and what you're already doing for no pay. So again, you guys are also kind of upset because this gave you no pay. As the corporations, you guys are like, yeah, okay, that's cool. As the government, you were applauded for actually doing something, but it didn't get passed, so sorry about that. And yes, again, as open source software people, you guys are like, this is okay, but we want money. So what you guys were arguing for is that there ought to be some sort of self-reliability. And so what happens with like products is that if your product like bursts into flames randomly, like you're vacuuming and suddenly you don't need a vacuum anymore because you don't have an apartment because your apartment burned down. Well, you could kind of sue that company. And you could sue for a couple different reasons. One is typically if it's for negligence, where you were like, this is like very obviously, they should have known that something was wrong, but they didn't, and that's their fault. We're going to sue you for negligence under a tort claim. Tort means injury, which basically means something, my property was damaged, something hurt me. I will sue you for that. But software, it's a little bit more difficult to like have people liable for software. One is that you guys as corporations were like, hell, we don't need to give you a warranty, so you did it. Other two difficulties is that the speed of software, it changes really rapidly, and it's very complex. So you guys as corporations have kind of been hiding under this like shield of, it's difficult for us. Sold as it is, cool. It is very difficult. So, but these open source software people are kind of saying like, you, in the previous slide, nobody's changed the incentive structure, right? Like, if we do things better, that's more work for us, but then the corporations still reap the rewards. And if they don't, like, if we push out a patch and they don't update it, is that still on us? Like, no, we need to change the incentive structure such that if corporations are hacked, they can be held liable. Like, that's what we do. So there's been a little bit more buzz. About 2 months ago, 3 months ago, there was a legal scholar named Jim Dempsey who argued for a two safe harbor approach. So his argument is that one, corporations who follow the best practices should be covered under a safe harbor that saves you from liability. And two, he wants to create a products liability framework such that if we look at the minor attack framework, if we look at like very common cybersecurity issues, and if those issues are exploited, and they should have been covered and patched, but they weren't, like the top 10, then you could sue. That's an automatic, you have room for suing. And so maybe open source people, like, keep a note of that. That's not a bad way to go. Yes.
What about open source licenses that explicitly say that the software is provided without warranty?
Yeah, we should be getting to that very shortly. Okay, so I'm gonna pass it off to Pranav to talk about licenses and corporations and NGOs. So here's more of a policy grab bag.
Okay, so say you're a company and you decide, I guess that you want to try helping the open source community. You've noticed that they're struggling and you want to like help with that. So what are the methods that you could use? You could try starting to release some internal projects that you've worked on as open source, give back to the community. Or maybe you have employees who have some free time and you tell them while on company time to just work on open source projects, or just donate straight to find an open source project that you like in particular, start donating to it. Other less common ones, you can start offering bounties for fixing bugs. Just start a program that says, if you fix these bugs in some specific software, I'll give you money, or handing out grants to specific projects that ask for it. So maybe it might be helpful to start taking a look at some companies in particular, see how they try and contribute to open source. Red Hat is a decent first example. Their entire business model is based around trying to
George worked at Red Hat this summer.
Okay.
On Red Hat.
The information in the slide is pretty accurate. I'd say if I were to include anything else, on the several popular open source libraries would be the kernel. That's something that, again, very many people use. Kind of like a policy note on Red Hat is that the government, which is us, if you're going to do business with us, you have to meet certain standards. We pass certain laws that make it difficult for you as a company to operate without meeting a certain threshold. Your software needs to be certified at some certain grade, and it's really painful to do that yourself. So you give Red Hat a lot of money to do it for you. Take it away.
well said. Which are we? I
Do you want to?
guess just anything that might not have been included in that summary. Their entire business model is based around marketing. Is based around it is based around repackaging open source software and basically selling it to companies, selling them the idea that they'll like maintain it for you and offer support, so that you don't have to worry as much when it goes wrong. And their contribution. So that's their primary relation to open source. They also have worked on a couple of popular open source libraries. and tools. So, an element, this is a charity based in the Netherlands where that is dedicated basically to funding anything open source. The idea being that they want to encourage stuff being openly available and free. So anyone's allowed to just submit a proposal asking for a funding grant, and they will look at that, take their money and give it if they think your project is worthwhile. Most of their money comes from donations. The probably big names here are, they get a decent amount of money from the European Union government and from the Swiss government. NSF pathways stuff probably shouldn't be here, but
SIGPwny?
interesting side note here, that is the European Union's approach to funding open source software. It is not the approach the US government takes to funding open source software, since their approach, the closest thing they have is something run by the National Science Foundation, NSF, called Pathways to Enable Open Source Ecosystems. They explicitly do not want to fund open source. Their goal is
I unmapped the government 2 years ago. Yeah, that was bound open, so I found the NIPRNet routers, and all 6 of them were running that. There's an on that DNS daemon that does their name resolution. So I was like, oh, that's interesting.
wait, essentially their goal is to create new open source ecosystems. So all of that money basically gets concentrated into a few large grants that go to universities, large organizations, stuff like that, not to open source developers who can't really ask for a grant as an individual. But tied with this is their entire business model is essentially companies theoretically want to make their open source software they rely on more secure. And open source developers want money, so we'll just sell a subscription to the companies and say, if you pay us, then we will like collect information about what open source packages you use. We'll decide how to reallocate that money, and we'll spend it so that you can be sure that the packages that you're maintaining are secure. So they will partner with open source maintainers and create and decide on some things that they want the open source maintainers to meet, and then give them money to essentially do that. And the Apache Foundation, this is a nonprofit which is basically just a volunteer-run organization with a company or life that takes care of all liability purposes. All of their members are essentially unpaid volunteers, but they have a governance structure and a corporation that provides legal protection for the volunteers in question. Okay, so say you are an open source maintainer now, and you have decided that you want more money and you don't really like how much you are currently getting. So what could you do? You could try asking for donations, set up a Patreon, or find another website that lets you do that, or start commercializing parts of your project. You add some features to your project that are only available if you pay for it, and if anyone wants to use your software for free, that's fine, but you don't get those big features. Or you allow your users to just pay for customer support, but if you are, while still providing old software for free, you could try going through venture capital funding. Alternatively, if you decide that maybe you don't really want businesses using your code without paying you because you would like them to pay you money, you could try messing with your license. One popular option is to find a license an open source license that explicitly that requires you to open source your code if you like the GPL. And you release your code with that under the assumption that companies won't really want to touch your code if they have to deal with that because they don't want to open source their code. But then you come to them with an offer, if you pay us, then we'll give you a license that doesn't make you do that. Or you could just give up and make your project closed source and say, add a restriction saying you can't use it unless you pick them. One kind of interesting example of that, the os.cache license is apparently a license that does exactly that. Probably the main difference here is that they also offer the ability to pay them in exchange for actually enforcing that license against companies.
So to answer your previous question, George, because we did not really get to that. The government, so your safe harbor like liability would apply to corporations. So open source software, I think, would not fall under the realm of that. But if your corporation uses open source software and that software has a bug that falls within those vulnerabilities, well, you're selling the product, man. I bought the product. I want my money's worth. So I'm going to sue. Yes.
Say, as a corporation, though, I can just avoid that by claiming it's a feature. And one way to point to that is the last 20 years of Active Directory authentication has been broken as a feature. So in an Active Directory environment, for example, because the way the Kerberos works and all that, you can not only recover passwords in some cases, you can also execute remote code authenticated as a feature that has remained unpatched since like the inception of Active Directory. And otherwise, that'd be like Clinic ARC is like a big deal. So
I see. So as a corporation, you were arguing that
it's a feature.
it's a feature.
This is like a real thing.
So as governments, when you want yourself to be secure, do you have anything to say to that?
How else am I supposed to recover my lost password?
On that note. Okay, so typically if this were a SIGPolicy, we would just let people shout things out, or sometimes we will do work time. But let's see.
So do you have like a specific scenario, or are we just convincing the other?
Oh, should we do this?
Right.
Huh?
Are we just convincing everyone else that like we should do what we want to do?
I think the general rule is that you want to convince everybody to do what you want to do. But I guess, do you think we could use XD?
Sure, that could be a good scenario.
So, okay, let's see.
Oh.
This could be
Yeah,
interesting.
it's true.
I guess it's a library, open source library that will maintain. A lot of companies in the government rely on it, so it's pretty much a prime example. So
We should also.
I think,
Okay, that could be our hypothetical.
and then you want to say that someone sues or terminating is liable.
I like that. Okay, wait, let us do that. We can restart these first. Government, corporation. Do you guys want to be sued or do you want to be the accident? Do you guys have a preference? Okay. Okay. Do you guys still want to be the open source developers or do you want to be the?
This is on my phone. Yeah, exactly. So scuffy.
Yes.
Like nobody anyway.
Yeah. I mean, what they get off from my.
Okay. So here's what's gonna happen. Slight reorder. So now we have the fourth group, the people who are gonna sue. And you guys all have to please them.
Are these, you should describe the scenario.
Okay, so scenario. Okay, scenario. Who wants to start it? Do you mind being the core like original XD developer dude?
He's overworked.
Okay, so. Okay, so you're overworked. You've been maintaining this stuff for like a decade or something, right?
I'll go back to doing your work. You have no time for this.
Someone's been maintaining the XD vector. Josh and Jake.
It's been really annoying.
Josh and Jake, you guys were the jab team. The malicious people. You guys, yeah, you guys like hijack stock next to it.
Wait, hold on. Wait. That's friend.
But in this case, for some reason, you were like still helping him be the open source representation. Okay, fine. Josh is the person who is malicious.
Jake, you're the lawyer.
I don't think I see as a lawyer.
You guys represent essentially what happened with XC. You guys are the corporations. You're Microsoft, but you didn't catch the bug, sorry. And so.
That sounds like Microsoft.
All right, so now you guys are like essentially propagating this backdoor. Those people are suing y'all. Cause they're like, yo,
Are those open source developers?
no, so they are now the plaintiffs, they are the consumers.
Oh, they're
They're consumers now, they
The
switched.
corporation?
They're suing the corporations, cause, I don't know, what is the worst thing that could happen with X? Like,
Remote code.
Everything running the library now belongs to anybody on the internet. As in, like, anybody that can make an internet connection.
Pretty bad.
Yeah.
oh, okay. So you guys like lost your lives and your identity.
Like,
Yeah.
Oh, okay, and all your money. Yeah.
Bank accounts are fully drained. Bank account passwords, like.
Really bad.
It's really bad.
You know, it's like, once the exploit goes, I think XC was special, because it had to be signed by a private key, so not quite, like, for log4j, if you had a vulnerable log4j thing on the internet, it's like a scrub. Like, anybody that can connect to it, it's just, so, like, you want people like fighting over your computer or proxying traffic through it, you're like, whatever. It's basically free real estate.
Wow, okay, so y'all got screwed. And now you're mad at them. And then you as a government, so that probably, but if a government like computer had XC.
Yeah, they're also screwed.
It's still gonna sue you.
Yeah, we're still.
At that point, well, building reliable software is hard. It isn't hard, it's catching threats. Microsoft Twitter antivirus, so, you know, we haven't seen none of that. Gotcha.
So essentially, we are gonna have a trial in like. How long do we need? 5 minutes to prepare your cases?
5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay, we'll have a trial, let's say 7 minutes.
Yeah.
I would like that.
So,
Combine that historical stuff.
You are.
We like our back and forth.
So make sure this never happens again. You guys.
And
you guys
Microsoft.
have a reason to sue.
What actually happened here? It's like, it sounds like it hasn't even seen outside, like, this would just be gone.
That's the key.
Wait, this is.
Well, yeah, everyone else was like. And I think.
Yeah, well, we live in nation.
Operate at a higher standard.
It's just.
That's the key, and if they pay enough, they're gonna chill.
The guy was legitimate.
Oh, no, it's funny. Then we'll start recording.
Paid him off.
Yeah, exactly.
Paid him off.
Minutes for when you said 7 minutes, then I think.
Oh, yeah, that's what. We'll give it during the Rachel, we just want open source to suck as much as possible. Now we can sell Microsoft XC. And then we can keep them coming friendly, Microsoft and their antivirus.
Yes, Microsoft Defender is totally gonna catch.
Really, there's no way legally. that they can get out of this. And we're gonna really regulate this hard. And require, like, intrusion, yeah, so we need more.
Part of the rule is that if you have any interaction and you work.
That's what I'm saying.
Crazy how that actually just happened. Henry.
You got my number.
You got the memo.
I'll filibuster. Yeah.
Filibuster the whole thing.
I'll go fix it. I'll get up and work.
You know,
I am the son of.
you know that.
He was like, yeah, pretty good. I wouldn't say that.
This is your fault. You should have put a bond place for this.
Saying he's the middle class. These poor people.
You should have protected them.
I am.
You lifted away his life.
That's what we're doing. Congress, I passed a rule, final injunction, Microsoft, Apple. And this,
Yes.
red and half.
Congress and Bill Rips law
His life away.
Cercia.
Okay.
What do you say to that?
Like, not this year, but next year, they have, they're gonna go require reporting rules.
Okay.
And so they proposed,
Should blame those guys.
proposed rules like last week.
You pay your taxes.
If you wanna look through the, like,
No.
if you're working for Cyber,
This is, you made the tax code.
you're gonna have to deal with this.
Yeah.
I can't change it by law.
No, but now with.
Yeah, you see the
It will be
graph,
legal
pages of like, don't do it in my country, it's like all the countries.
Yeah, but I thought I still think it's fine.
Or you guys is hard.
No, now there's like literal.
Right after like turbo tax.
Yeah, no, I don't. That's what I'm saying, it's like, you can't.
I really wonder if it was one of the into it. Because no one
No.
Now you're like.
So this would give. So if they believe that, oh, I'm something in here, they could subpoena you, go, was somebody in your work, and then if it is, you're in a lot of. Good to know.
Yeah, no wonder plenty of scams by ransomware games place. And then I'm like, you need to pay up.
Intelligence
Or people sue you for not doing responsible.
Yes, or no.
One of the fun, like, allocating all resources to fight this. My colleague, the NSA, we overhand the others.
See you for now.
That should have been.
Yeah, exactly.
Weren't you also?
Yeah.
They're also ruining.
I'm gonna be honest, I keep all my passwords on a piece of paper. You know, I don't.
They're all the same.
I still use a BlackBerry from 2007. Steve Jobs business, I'm not, no, I'm not a fan.
That's the big BlackBerry. I need.
2 minutes? Nah, I
Reading all your emails.
are we ready for the court trial? Okay, we're ready. Plaintiffs and defendants.
Who do you want to sue?
Let's go.
Right now, you lost your livelihoods, and all you did was install Microsoft.
Yes. I'm gonna throw myself alive against for their company.
You're gonna make it. It's not an option on the table.
Okay.
It's not an option on the table. Instead, you have great lawyers. I'll be your lawyers, okay?
Yeah.
So who do you want to send me on your lawyer?
Installed.
There's also a lot of Microsoft out there, they come to Microsoft.
Yeah.
So Microsoft, okay, Microsoft,
guys are being sued.
you are being sued. Oh, wait, no, I want to consult government first. Governments,
We're suing Microsoft.
do you want to sue? Okay,
We're immediately suing Microsoft corporations at 1%.
wow.
We did it right. It's not our fault.
Okay, so right now, you guys are being sued for negligence.
I think we have multiple counter arguments. Yeah.
Multiple counter arguments. Let's go.
I mean, the one I was to go with is, again, it's not our software, it's their software, so it's not our
Yeah, yeah.
problem. It's not our responsibility either. Our responsibility is Microsoft software. So, you know,
But it was your system.
well, that's wonderful. But we made it to our specs, right? Like following all the Microsoft stuff, and it doesn't fall under our thing. Like, we're not responsible for securing Apple software. We wouldn't get sued for an Apple for you. We just happen to be dependent on it.
If we
So,
buy a chip, we're not responsible for the security of the chip. We bought the chip.
Yeah.
Same scenario.
But you're profiting off the consumers with that software.
we profit off consumers with all sorts of products.
That software was provided without liability or warranty, and you use that knowing it.
You did this, though. You don't want to put the back door in, George.
I did not comment on my transaction history with Jacob at this time.
If you buy a computer that has an Intel processor in it, and the processor dies, you still go to the laptop manufacturer for warranty. You do not go to Intel for warranty.
Well, we don't provide you a warranty for XC.
Yeah, we don't provide any sort of.
We don't do that.
It's
Government,
your
seems like
fault
it's
for
wrong.
using Windows.
You should have.
You should have known that our software is full of bugs. You have no argument here.
That's, I've never heard a corporation use that. You should have known better than to buy our product.
I would like to propose, instead of suing Microsoft, we would like to impose something worse
Something works.
regulation.
Oh. Okay, what's
It's a
your,
great idea.
what's your regulation?
I would like to drag out the CEO of Microsoft, hearing in front of Congress, where he can explain how my 6-year-olds are.
How about instead we regulate the open source software, so our closed source software stays unregulated?
This guy gets it.
It's a possibility. It's a
Possibility.
possibility.
Oh my gosh, open source.
Why don't we have some more regulations?
We have to debate.
You guys are punching bag.
No money in the balls.
Yeah, that's as much.
I'm just saying.
Rough for y'all. Corporations are profiting off of your.
Seismic is not contributing to my campaign.
You guys.
Damn, George, I see how it is. On Twitter.
He's like, play it, once we get on the regulation.
Vote for us.
So like.
Take out Microsoft.
We even go there is because it's open source.
Oh, yeah.
It's all-
What is he doing us on the ground?
If there's some bug in Microsoft, if I stick a bug in Microsoft software instead, no one will ever. Because. So why are they, why are they regulating us instead of them? They at least were able to tell that there were a bug. If I stuck a bug into your software, that was in your backend code base.
Well, hold on, we pay a lot of people a very modest sum of money to do very low quality testing on our products here.
Wait, what exactly are the grounds for the suing? Negligence?
Well, right now, because, right now, because we don't have a liability.
I would argue that there's no framework set up. So there's no way we could know. We tried our best. We couldn't find the back door.
I mean, even if there were.
If there was a framework set up, maybe we could follow this framework.
But Force Sergeant has been complaining about being overworked for the past like 10 years.
Well, that's too bad.
By now, it's more than 10 years.
By now, it's more than 10 years.
That's too bad.
She's
If
been
you at any point in time ask for assistance among the use of your software? Like financial or otherwise?
Yeah, for sure.
You want compensation?
Care to explain?
Big compensation, yeah. Especially for like the hours I work.
Months.
Made a GoFundMe. And then,
He's been.
and there's been like a total of 3 people in the GoFundMe.
And it's with other people that are working on it.
Exactly.
Let's take the socket one step further. Every single time you download his software, he puts something that says, please support this open source software. Without like your support, we can't guarantee the security. Let's say he went that far. So if you say npm install or something like that.
Have you seen?
Yeah. That is what we're trying to find it.
You may or may not have backdoors, given the black economy.
I just.
I'm not sure how this works.
As a resident of St. Petersburg, Russia, like
Yeah.
I'm installing the
Yeah.
software and I will always make open software despite whatever stupid US regulations come to play.
Wait, so.
As a president.
As a resident of Russia,
Yeah.
who makes software for great US corporations, why do I care about regulations?
Hey, governments, we got some, can you repeat that to the government, please?
Yeah, so as a proud Russian citizen,
How do I care about the software
that I created in Russia and that stupid corporations like Microsoft end up using?
Because we will not allow are American corporations to use dirty Russian
How
code.
do you know I'm Russian?
We just-
I don't know who my GitHub username is. Yeah.
I'm just saying, the comments said that there were some expletives in the Cyrillic alphabet.
The American government needs to build the next firewall.
The NSA has hacked your phone and we know you're in St. Petersburg.
Who needs regulations to build that up there?
Yeah, I also think that
Wait, okay, so let us go back. What are the regulations you want to enforce?
We secretly don't want to impose any regulations, but we would like the citizens to think we're going to impose regulations. We want to see, we want to seem tough without compromising any donations.
Are you happy about any of this regulation stuff?
Yeah, let's regulate the open source.
Quid pro quo. How was that? Rick?
Whoa! Not where I thought
I'm
this
with George,
conversation
I'm with
was
George on this. We can put it on the open source developer.
So you guys are gonna go after the open source developers right now?
With a little,
Yeah,
little something.
So,
The campaign fund will continue funded.
No, I think we should, so thank you for your support. Good luck.
I mean, what, this is legal, official lobby.
Pretty sharp left here.
There's your lobby, huh?
I have another question. How are the consumers able to afford a lawyer to challenge Microsoft?
Class action, my friend, class action, all of them lost their livelihoods. They might vote you out of office, you could have all the money in the world, but they're rioting on the streets right now because their identities have been stolen. And they're screaming, this is me. They're saying Katy Perry.
Or you could take a Texas police approach and just like put up royal police.
We could, but I don't think I'm similar with the other,
You need a scapegoat. What about regulations like product liability, so we could actually.
There's no. No, what are you doing?
Alright, well, we already overhead some guy.
All right.
So that we can't do anything about it.
Just,
I think.
Like,
I think the most utilitarian
Lockup's talking
half
about.
of the Senate is home. for
is to
lawyers.
leave it as the
We
one.
still have to story over.
Because
We
Microsoft,
get something through.
the government they want it, but they don't really.
They want.
Open source probably doesn't want to get regulated. I don't see why they would. The only governmental solution is the people who can sue it, but no individual step on chain.
Okay. You know what, I'm gonna up the stakes a little bit. Y'all, as like personal users, not even government employees, you're still like government employees, but you guys would have to. And now you're like them, your identities are stolen.
That's fine.
So we had a good point. This is a matter of national security. You guys got hacked too. You guys are responsible for national security.
Yeah, we're saying fix it.
We can't fix it. We don't control SIGPwny.
Yeah. I want more money.
Screw it.
Please.
You pay what these
I
guys
love
pay
what
for
that-
Windows, so you can play it's not your problem.
Hey, you pay him.
You pay him. Give him some money, bro.
We don't wanna
see
pay
his
him.
family. You want some
Yeah,
buyback.
by now they left.
All he works on is the XC back.
We're not the back door.
You're the one.
No.
No, we work on.
Oh, you got. Oh, okay.
And then I work in their.
Okay, you guys may be tracking down this Russian hacker guy.
Yeah, but what are they gonna
Why?
do?
Yeah,
well, hold on, wait a second. You guys said, your stuff.
How did you let this happen?
How
did you let this happen?
My version of Windows working just fine, and you pushed an update that had the backdoor in
We
it.
are not liable. You're supposed to be auditing everything you use. You see Joe Biden's framework?
I have 10 interns back there.
Any government contract.
Are liable.
Okay. Yeah, I can get 1,000 instances of ChatGPT to say, I'm.
Based on like all past precedent, this would not be Microsoft's problem. There have been many breaches due to. And Microsoft still not held responsible because that's just the nature of the way Microsoft runs things.
Apple to Excel.
We've been hacked so many times. We should have known.
I saw this.
Well, I think you could still make its feature claim though as well.
Perhaps not in this case with like.
Yeah,
And also, what, they need to be auditing their own shit. They need to be auditing us.
a reasonable.
Here you are.
No, you're not.
Whatever.
How do you not detect this?
Why is it back?
You assume risks just by being a user of Active Directory.
I'm just saying,
Like,
we
I feel like
followed all the
system
regulations you put in place. We're A-okay.
Would actually go through courts. You guys as corporations would probably. But I do think if something were big enough, there would be enough public pressure just for national security reasons that you guys would have to introduce another bill that like would not get passed. Because
You're no longer allowed to use Java. Java is illegal, we won't fund you. We will not.
Python and Rust.
We will not pay for missile guidance systems until you stop using Java.
What about JavaScript?
Wait, what was
Yeah, this is exactly what they tried to do.
Yeah, this is like an actual fit, yes.
You said only use Python and Rust.
Yeah. Don't do that. XZ, that's written in C. Don't do that. Rewrite it in Rust.
all right.
No, I think it's specific to government subcontractors.
Where's the
Actual, honestly, like.
I'm looking at the time.
Yeah, we're at.
Conclusion,
Do you want to provide your brief thoughts on what actually happened?
what would
Yeah,
actually happen right now? Honestly, the saddest part for this for me was, I love the lobbying that happens. I think that would happen.
It's not gonna lobby them.
Yeah.
Simon would not lobby, but again, there's like legal counsel who might take this on for free pro bono, like EFF might represent Sagnic. But essentially what would happen, class action, you would sue, corporations would be like worried about PR, I think, more so than you guys were worried about PR in this case. You probably would claim that it's not negligence because it's Sagnic's fault. Sagnic would be sad, EFF would jump in and be like, yo, they would go to the government and they would lobby the government. You guys are lobbying the government. Government's gonna like try to pass some bill. They're gonna do whatever they're like would keep them in office. So if enough people are mad about it, government's probably like there might be enough push for government to pass some bill. But in this case, to concede a public pressure, you guys would likely settle with those poor people. Give them, you can't give them back their like livelihoods or identity. For PR reasons, I mean, there is enough like to the negligence such that there's.
What is it a highly complicated backdoor? It's actually hard to, it'd actually be almost impossible for us to.
Yeah, no,
detect
I think based on precedent, like during Stuxnet, right, wasn't it almost an entire country that got silently taken over by this complexity? It was found like also by chance.
Okay, but this would be like impossible to detect.
Yeah,
I didn't really go into the details, but this shit is.
that you would not find.
You would not find it?
Like this was a chance occurrence, just like.
I don't think you explain, like, you can say that, but you can't explain that to the public. Like, the public doesn't know that it's like a super hard to detect bug. They just know that like stuff's
Yeah.
broken, you know, it's like.
So XC specifically, I believe was different. XC required the attacker to sign the payload with their private key, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, this was like a specific group that had like monopoly and stuff.
I guess he's saying,
But
you know,
I'm just
the
saying,
consumer
like,
doesn't care.
People don't really, they're just seeing Microsoft bug
Yeah.
broken, like, that's it, like.
Yeah.
So it's like, whether it's, yeah, what you said, yeah, when was it ever not?
So in this case, if it were truly that difficult, you could probably like set up some fund for the victims because it was through your software, and then you might actually go the other way and go with government and say like, yo, you're right, this needs to get fixed. Let's create regulation, but the regulation will actually help you a little bit more than it will help your competitors if you're smart about it. That's the way to do it.
I like that.
We will offer you a CA or $25 per victim.
We will pay $5,000. Hopes he accepts
you
my
guys-
liabilities. which you should.
So wait, the only people that won here is the Russian hackers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I have a,
As usual.
Where are the people?
But we can't really tell right now.
And we found the first 2 days, it's gotta be. Or like there's people.
Yeah, but I think we're probably
So there's a couple senators that are.
Yeah, I assume there's more.
privacy, security right now, Maria Cottrell.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Ron Biden. So there's also a couple who are like.
It's not about 500.
Yeah, there's.
Yeah, it's not hard for the NSA. It's probably-
Partisan thing.
Oh, yeah, or just.
Also, like popular, like one party, you know, forward, so the party won't, or it's just not very.
It's not much political, but for economic. Yeah.
Public doesn't care as much about.
But bipartisan, cybersecurity is more bipartisan, so there used to be, people are talking about, tracking data brokers. Bipartisan, it was against data brokers selling information on military. So if you really actually, like, not just.
Yeah, but the thing is that what it meant was like.
University-line companies essentially lobbying and both.
I think-
For example, Lexi, let's say, Vector is.
No, but I'm saying like, if you're developing something that's theoretically, server side.
I would never go. Like if like
Yeah.
a state on,
Need people on to make sure that you're.
And then there's a problem.
they get hacked.
Yeah, like
and now they're
that
suing.
piece
like,
thing.
And now you have like.
I also
the biggest
think
insurance.
probably still stuff going on. That's why we don't know about.
State Farm has. They were on the latest update.
Did you not buy insurance? Yeah, and I mean, the license protocol
I
itself.
think it's less likely,
I think
because
because
the chain of reporting that you have to do.
That's.
Because like Wars Run.
Make sure you're with in the first line, over there.
No one, and you're with us, buddy.
We're gonna bring it out.
Yeah, and it would try to be settlement too, because it's bad for, like, bad for move for both parties to have a huge, like, get from microservices.
I can get a little. Yeah. All right, yeah, so next meeting is this Sunday with SIGPwny. And give it up for Kylie and Pranav for letting me. All right, that's it.